Hi everyone, this is Alexandra for FNC Poker, and today I'm going to show you how to review your hands like a professional. I know a lot of you out there, unfortunately, when reviewing your hand, you just look at the hand, look at the solver output, look at what your hand is supposed to do, say this is correct or not correct, and move on. The problem with this is that that's not really an efficient study process. It's very likely something that doesn't lead to you knowing or understanding more about poker, and today I want to show you a quite quick and efficient way to review your hands in a way that you will actually gain some knowledge and will be able to apply that to other poker spots. Before we get into the actual hand, make sure you like this video and subscribe to our channel for more fun and educational poker content. So this hand was played on GG Poker 100 NL, and what I know about Villain is that he was a rag on the passive side, not too aggressive. He wasn't an 8 or anything, but he was on the passive side. So the first step to take when reviewing your hands is to reconstitute your thought process. And I think this is quite important because if you made a mistake or if you weren't sure what to do in a particular hand, that probably means there's either a flaw in your thought process or a gap, a knowledge gap, so probably some knowledge missing. And that is easy to spot when you reconstitute the thought process. And I think this is why it's actually quite important to review your hands shortly after you play them, because then it's much easier to go through what your actual thought process was in the hand. That's much easier to do, obviously, if you review 2 hours after your session than 2 weeks after your session. So let's try to do that for this hand in question, where we open Jack Standard again. We get 3-bet by MP, and here pre-flop Jacks are mostly a 4-bet, but calling them is also fine sometimes. Not really much to say about pre-flop. And now on the flop, we check. I wouldn't really have any donks on this board. I don't think it's a thing in GTO either, but we will see that soon. And Villain goes for a 3/4 bet. And my thought process here was that first thing that I have to do is to consider all my options here. So calling doesn't seem amazing because when Villain is betting for this size in such a tight range configuration, he's basically wrapping over pairs plus for value. I don't really think, I mean, he could have some ace-10, but overall his range is really, really strong. And our hand doesn't really beat almost any of his value range, but more than that, performs really bad on multiple streets, especially because we don't have a backdoor flush draw. It's very vulnerable to overcards, it does block some bluffs. So yeah, calling doesn't seem like an amazing option. Then raising seems even worse because, as I said, his value range is pretty much crushing us. His bluffs have quite a lot of equity, and this is basically the kind of spot where if we raise, we mostly get worse to fold and better to call. And this is definitely not a super strong hand here, so I don't think raising is great. And then folding, I was considering it in game, but I was also thinking, well, it seems a bit nitty to fold here because he can still have worse value hands like 10x. We still probably have a lot of equity here, and it just seemed like we want to continue this hand. So weighing all of these 3 bad options, I decided that probably call is the best one. So I decided to go for a call. The turn is a 7, which is quite a good card for us. We will have here some 6-7, 9-8. In reality, I don't think we're gonna have that very often. But also, this doesn't really improve Villain's range in any way. If we have any backdoor flush draws, we now have some equity. So I don't think Villain should do all that much batting here on the turn. And another thing that you should be aware of here if you play as in position is that we are really concerned with not getting check shoved with hands that have a lot of equity but are in a terrible spot if shoved on, such as flush draws, some straight draws. But in reality, I think a lot of villains are not really aware of this. So what ends up happening is that they probably bet here too equity driven, so a bit too many flush draws, or hands that actually have a terrible time if they face a check shove. So I think this is something that we need to keep in mind and be aware of. And let's see what's happening on the turn. We check, and now we face quite a big bet. You see the SPR here is getting quite small, and what I was thinking here is that, calling is not great, but I think if we are right about villain's range and he has too many flush draws in here and too little low equity bluffs, which I think it's kind of consistent with how most people play in these stakes, again, especially regulars that are, on a bit on the passive side. So I decided that calling is not great, but I think there's enough equity to deny here to just go for a shove, which is obviously not very high V play because he's still going to have his overpairs, and I don't think he's going to fold those. But I thought in game that it's probably higher EV than folding and higher EV than raising. And in game what happened is that villain tanked for a really long while before calling with aces. So this makes me think this could be a kind of, combo hand that sometimes gets better to call, like ace king of diamonds, and worse to fold, because he tanked like almost his whole time hand, which was quite surprising to me. But yeah, obviously my intention wasn't to bluff this hand. And okay, this was the first step. We kind of reconstituted my thought process. I wasn't really sure on what we were supposed to do on the flop. So now let's go to the second step, which is looking into the solver's thought process, and not just looking into it, but trying to understand what's actually going on. So here we have an under the gun versus hijack spot. You see it's the same flop. Under the gun is not supposed to donk here, and hijack is supposed to bet very frequently for a small size. This indicates it's quite a good board for him. But in game, our villain went for a 3/4. So we're going to put this, and let's look a bit into what he's supposed to bet with. So we already see hands like king jack without a backdoor flush draw are betting more often than the same hand with a backdoor flush draw, same with queen jack. And this is because of what I mentioned previously. When you have this kind of high equity hands but not too strong, you don't really want to get check raised, so you prefer checking them back. We see quite a lot of king queen offsuit even without a backdoor flush draw betting. We see 8 and the 7s betting really frequently for a big size. This is probably because they are supposed to again get some better hands to fold, such as 9s, 8s, and also get some worse hands to call, such as flush draws. So looking at this, I think it's already, look, 6x also betting very frequently. And this is actually kind of the third step into reviewing the hands process. It is to look at how real games might differ from solver, and this is what we're doing here. We're trying to understand if villain's range here will be constructed differently or not. And I think there are already some combos that are betting here that most villains are unlikely to find. So I think what's going to happen is that his range is probably going to be a bit stronger, a bit more equity driven, which makes our defense lower EV in general. Let's see what happens if we face this bet. Okay, so we already see that jacks are a pure fold. looking at EV, we see they lose a little bit in the sim without the backdoor flash draw, but because of what we said, I think in reality this call is even worse. So yeah, I think the thought process that I should fold and this is not a great call was the good one. And now it's confirmed that this was a mistake on the flop, and I think it was a bigger mistake in practice than it is in the solver. You see, even queens are indifferent to calling or folding. So this is already a really tight range spot, and in practice might be even tighter, so I would have liked to see a fold here. But now in order to see the turn, we're going to force us to call this combo of jacks very, very infrequently. In reality, we would probably make the mistake of calling more often, but just for the sake of the video, let's give us a very low amount of jacks without the backdoor flush draw. And see what we are supposed to do on the turn. So we see we are already supposed to donk very, very often. This indicates this is quite a good card for us. Maybe if his range is more equity driven than this, that won't be the case all that often. To be honest, I don't think I would have that many donks here in game, which, yeah, I would probably not donk here, which might be a mistake. Something I might look into. But that I might say for the next session. Let me know in the comments if you're interested in how to donk turns and, you know, what the impact of this strategy is. So you see, once we don't have donks, hijack is supposed to check back very, very, very frequently. I don't think this is going to happen. So let's say he's betting a bit more often. But more than betting a bit more often, if we look here at what flush draws and not flush draws are supposed to do, they're supposed to check back very, very frequently. I don't think this is something that really happens in practice with real opponents. So let's say they are betting like 50% of the times. Now lock this. And see what we are supposed to do against this bet. And we see now we are just raising or folding, and that we are basically not have raising or calling, and we don't basically have any folds. This is because we already filtered our range by calling a big bet on the flop, and he is just betting too many hands that have equity but don't really have showdown value yet, and will be put in a really, really tough spot against a check shove. So you see, if we make this assumption, our jacks are always a shove, and the difference in EV is quite significant. Let's compare this to the original, not node lock sim on the turn. We still keep our jacks. So let's say we have all these donks. And now facing a bet, jacks are almost pure folding, actually indifferent to calling or folding. But what I want to highlight with this is that you need to take the third step in our hand review process and think of how practice differs from reality, because sometimes the solver output won't be the correct output for the games you play in. And then the fourth step of this process is to draw conclusions based on what you've just seen in the hand that you reviewed and see how that applies in different spots. So these conclusions that you're drawing should be something that improves your overall poker knowledge and your overall understanding of this game. So for example, in this hand, I think what we learned, if we go back to the flop, I assume that jacks here will be a hand that will still have quite a lot of equity. So if we go to equity, we see jacks have 52% equity, which is way more than we need to call 75% bet, right? But what's happening here is that the equity realization is just terrible. So because of this, we cannot call jacks here. So that the conclusion that we're drawing is that we can fold hands that have really good equity if they have terrible equity realization, especially out of position against tight ranges and or big bets. Obviously, we will need to dig deeper to see how much this applies in different spots, how much this applies against smaller bets or wider ranges. So there is a lot of things that you can build on this knowledge, but this is a conclusion that will help us in different hands that we play. And the second conclusion that we draw is that if our opponent bets too many equity hands that don't have showdown value, we should respond aggressively and make sure to raise a lot in order to be able to realize our own equity. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you liked it. Let us know in the comments if you applied this thought process and this hand reviewing process, if it helped you or not. And make sure to like and subscribe to our channel for more educational poker content. Also, we run a Discord community where we do weekly hand reviews and study sessions, so make sure to join that as well to connect with us and get offers for our coaching programs and other events to come.